Hi, this is Elliot Offer. I'm here with Maliha and Lindsey. Lindsey is a drug expert working at troubled youth to try and help us off drugs and just give us a bit of a round education. So I guess, Lindsey, how are you doing today?
Yeah, fine. Monday morning. I've seen a few hangovers in the audience.
Right, Marnie, do you want to kick us off with questioning?
Yeah, okay. So these questions are from some of the digital journalists in our course. This one is from Beliz. And she said, if someone you know needs help but doesn't want it, what is the best thing you can do for them?
What we do in that instance, because that's quite a lot of the young people that I actually deal with day in, day out, is you know they're using a drug, you know how harmful that could be to them, but at that point they don't perceive they've got a problem, and there's no point in actually trying to convince them that they've got a problem. So what we do then is what we call harm minimalisation, risk reduction. We give them as much information about it as possible and as many avenues as possible should they want some help that they can contact. Right, and that's the best we can do in supporting a friend through that.
Okay.
So in that sort of circumstance, you'd say you try and educate them, but you don't want to push too much. You don't want to try and force them into something they're not ready for. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, yeah, if you think of it another way, okay, say that you're, and a lot of people try to understand, I don't know what it's like to have a drug problem. Understand, for instance, if you've had a bad relationship with somebody, and all your peer group can see how destructive this partner is to you, and they're all saying, oh, you've got to leave them, you've got to leave them, you've got to stop. If you still really care about this person and it's giving you what you want, you're not going to stop. You're just going to lie. You're going to say, yeah, I have stopped, but you're still going to see them away from your friends. And that's kind of what happens with that. So in the first stage, it's not about really sort of pushing too much because it creates much more of a barrier. It's a case of just drip feed that information and just constantly, are you okay? Do you need any help and support? Is there somebody I can contact? Until the person wants to. They may never perceive they've got a problem, they may come out the other side and never need services support.
Yeah, so with services support, can you give us a brief insight of what the information is like? Just sort of like a generic, like, just how you'd help someone if they approach you and say they have a problem with like a one specific drug.
Yeah, if somebody comes forward, it really does depend on the drug because different drugs require different treatment processes. We have addiction, for instance, which is the brain craves the product. So there, what we've got to do is try and get your brain to think differently about it. So that would involve CBTs, cognitive behavioural therapies, and that would be done in counselling. If it's something like heroin, which is dependence form, your body relies on it, then I've got to get the product physically out of your system and then start helping your brain. So there's different approaches. But first what I do in my care plan is I look at 4 key areas. I look at physical, what's happening to your body, okay, psychological, what's happening to your brain, social, how is it affecting your life? Are you in control? Is it control of you? And then the last one is lawful. Are you at risk? Is there laws that may affect you long term with your involvement with this? So that would be my framework: physical, psychological, social, lawful, and put together a care plan around that.
Okay, and is it really individual? It's different for everyone?
Oh, of course, yes, yeah. I studied and studied and studied, and my consultant gave me the best piece of advice in the world. It doesn't matter how long you study, your first client won't be in the book. And he's pretty much true.
Right, okay.
Right, so you talked about the 4 areas there. Would you say that there's one area that you believe is more important overall, or is it, like we've said, dependent on the person?
It depends on the person and how it's affecting their life. Some people may not present with any mental problems from their drug use at all. They may not present with any physical problems from their drug use. The social may be controlled. They might be able to afford what they're using. They might only be using a couple of times a month. So there you can see with those 3 key areas, the person is not presenting with a problem. But there again, there could be the lawful. Do you realise if you get arrested today for smoking a joint in Dartford High Street, you could argue that it's only going to be a £20 fine. But you've also got to bear in fact that for the rest of your life, you will not be allowed to go to America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. They won't allow you in with a drugs conviction. So you've got long-term damage that it causes.
Yeah, so would you say part of your care plan is to help people realise the long-term effects that they don't think about? Because when someone says, oh, I've been like arrested for like possession or something, they're thinking, oh, like the drug itself, but like things like travel and stuff isn't things that people really initially think about. So would you say part of the care plan is helping them realise side effects that aren't necessarily talked about as much as they should be with drugs?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, making them aware of the full picture so as they're making an informed decision. That's the key to it, is giving as much information as possible about the key areas. It's up to an individual what they wish to do with their body. It's my job to give them much information to base that decision.
Fair enough. If you... so... We're quite curious, I think both of us are, about your time using drugs and dealing drugs. And we obviously are aware that you had that really long period of time where you wasn't given education to other people about these problems. If you had someone in your life who did the same thing that you did for us, do you think that things would have worked out differently for you? Do you think you would have gone down the same sort of path?
If someone just sat and presented all the information to you when you were just on the cusp of getting into the drugs at a heavy level?
Yeah, I think I would, because one of the things that we forget, we get really, really stuck into this thing of addiction and dependence around the use of the drug. But the one that we forget, which is the first biggest pull, is the culture of drug use, the peer group that you're involved in, the social life you're involved in. That is much more of a bigger pull. I was much more at risk from the social life of drugs in the early days than I was from the drug itself.
Yeah.
The kind of antisocial behaviour and the crime that I got into around the peer group that we're using.
So, with the peer group that we're using, what was your initial draw to the peer group itself? Like, how old were you when you first started hanging out with this peer group?
This is the thing, you see, I was younger. I was about 13, 14 years old and quite naive by today's 13, 14-year-old standards.
Oh,
and
so could you say you were one of those 13-year-olds who thought they could conquer the world and that was just very, look at me, I'm the king?
It wasn't so much a case of that. It was a case of belonging. It was, I started hanging around with a street gang. And the appeal was the street gang. The drugs sort of came in a little while later, and my first involvement with drugs was just one of those situations that a lot of people listening might have been in, where you're just in a room with a group of people, they're all older than me, a joint got passed round, it suddenly ended up in front of me, and I didn't have the bottle to say no.
So it's peer pressure in a way.
Sort of. I just didn't want to look like an idiot.
It was peer pressure, but it was peer pressure put on you by yourself.
By myself, yeah.
So it was very...
Yeah.
I think that's happened a lot as well with
Yeah,
nowadays, because they don't want to see as cowardice or like not brave enough to do it, or the weakest person in the group if they say no. But really, it makes them stronger.
It's the strongest person in the group, the person that they would say no. Like,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think with like users as a whole, I think a lot of it starts at a social level and then it will affect deeper. Like,
oh, indeed, definitely, indeed, yes. It all starts with that social level. Very rarely have I seen somebody that used solitary, has never used with a peer group, has developed their problem on their own. It's generally been a social use with a peer group, and then that has developed and become out of hand into individual use, i.e. they used to use just with their friends on a Friday, Saturday night. They're now starting to have a spliff on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, on their own in their bedroom.
Yes. So with that, would you say that sometimes when someone asks for help but they're still in a social group of drug users, would you say that then it becomes a lot more difficult to help because of the circumstances of the social life aspect of it?
Really depends on who your peer group is. If you're lucky enough to have quite a good peer group, even though they're drug users in all intents and purposes, you could still have good friends in that could help you put your own confines on. Yeah. As I say, nobody should be hassled into using. If your peer group of friends and you say to them, look, I don't want to use anything tonight. I just want to stay straight. I want to keep myself together. I've got things to do next week. A good peer group would go, okay.
Yeah.
If you've got a peer group going, no, and badgering you, then that's not a peer group you want to be with.
I think part of it is the case of, even with a good peer group that's saying no, like psychologically you then feel a bit weird, just sort of, because for some people it's a routine more than anything, isn't it, to go out with your peer group and then like smoke a spliff or like do whatever. Could you say part of it is just trying to break the thought in their mind of, it's routine when I'm with these people to do these things? Would you say that's something you've
Yes,
seen before?
definitely, yeah. And it's the same with drinking, isn't it? And people saying, well, I can't not have an alcoholic drink. I'm going to a bar.
Yeah, that's
I
me.
have to drink.
Yeah.
Well, do you? And
No,
then the same
yeah,
comes with drugs. Do you have to because you're in that environment?
I think the way, like, I mean, I'm not clued up. I'm a 16-year-old. Like but I think a lot of it would be it's social, and then it becomes psychological, and then it builds off that, because socially you get like handed a joint or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, and then you're like, oh that was cool. They all do it. They're cool. I'll keep doing it, and then would you say that's where it can develop into a more severe problem?
Definitely, that's when you're looking who has control over the use and who doesn't. Who's going, right, I've got a week of college work to do. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to do this Saturday night. I'm going to reward myself. Yeah. That's more controlled use, okay? That's the person that's sort of got a hand on it. What we're looking for is the person going, I can't face college today, I'll have a spliff.
So it's sort of the person that tries to solve whatever issue they're facing with drugs. They sort of use drugs as a...
Or avoid situations.
Sort of as an avoidance or a like dependency. Would you say they're the people that are needing the help the most, if you understand what I mean?
Again, what I say with this needing help, it's
like
the person's
when
decision. We can look from the outside and go, you really need help.
But
it's the person that has to come to that realisation.
You can't push them because
I can't. No.
This
is the problem I get with parents dragging their children into me.
If the children
they're using
don't want
drugs.
help,
Stop! I can't make them stop.
Yeah.
They need to have the initial thought for you to then relay the information. I'm assuming that's how it works. So
yeah.
The thing is, if people I definitely know that people my age, if they're pressured into something, they tend to rebel. A lot of parents, if they are particularly like religious or particularly against drugs or particularly against them going out, you get a lot of teenagers who completely rebel against that. So you get people who break out of their houses, of their rooms, and then go out and then don't come back for a few days, and then get up to all of these things because their parents have specifically said, do not do this, you'll be in so much trouble if you do this. And it would especially work for the same like with medical professionals as well. If they're saying, like, do not do this at all, it's really terrible for you, or so many other ways. Many children and teenagers, especially people who I know, take that as I'm going to do it anyway because they've said no. It's like this mental thing that we have. If people say, it's not bad for you, but if you want to do it, if you want to damage your life, then go ahead and do it. That sort of changes it, and it's sort of like, I don't want to damage my life. I don't want to do this. Maybe I should do something different. And I think that's why your talk was I think it worked a lot, because you didn't come out outrightly and say, do not do these drugs.
No,
you're just educating people to the concerns and to the problems for using them.
That's it.
The thing is, when you were giving the talk, you were showing like the detrimental effects, but not once did you actually say that this is bad. You shouldn't do. You literally just laid out the information and let people take what they want from it. And I think, especially with people of the age demographic you're going to, like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, like I think we're old enough to look at information, then make our own decision, which is the whole intent of your work. But I think if you came in and just done drugs bad, don't do drugs, no one's going to listen. But I do think the way that it's laid out is very effective. Yeah. And is that something that took you time to perfect, or is that something that you...
Oh, definitely, yes. Because I worked for agencies over years where we're given a party line, an approach that you must take in the organisation's mandate. I must come in and hammer on about the dangers of this, the dangers of that, and I see obscure ones. This drug can kill because one person died from it in 1982, and you get this kind of thing. So I don't think there's any benefits in that. In the scare stories, in laying it on heavy, I think it's best just to treat people as intelligent individuals and go, here's the information, you work it out.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think that's very fair. So if we're looking a bit more, would you say that the way you lay it out is because that's something you would have liked when you came to the realisation that you needed to stop doing drugs? Would that be fair?
Yeah, well, kind of. But the thing is, I was well into my 20s when I kind of came to that decision that I didn't want to do drugs anymore.
So you sort of
and it was the influence of my peer group, which really, really helped. And they were recreational users. But it was one specific guy who's no longer with us, unfortunately. He passed away last year. But without mentioning his name at all, we grew up several houses apart. But our lives were so different. He went to Oxford, he got a degree in English Lit, he was a journalist, he worked on The Guardian. Absolutely fantastic. And one day, just larking around, I turned around and said to him, how comes our lives are so different? And he gave me one of the best pieces of advice in the world. He said, you're not unintelligent, you're uneducated, and there's a difference. And he actually gave me the confidence to go to night school and then go to college and then go on.
That gave you the kick up the bum.
It gave me that kick because I just thought I was too dumb.
No, it's not the case. Anyone can learn anything if you are just...
I think the way also you lay out your work, talking about your past experiences, helps to relate a lot more and then help us understand. Because like anyone can just tell me the effects of drugs, but hearing it from someone who's been there, hearing it from someone who's done that and they've quit because they've seen it, I think it speaks a lot more than someone who's never touched a drug telling me why drugs are bad. I think it's...
Yeah, see, one of my big worries these days is that, the harm from the drugs is only part of the harm. A lot of the harm that we're seeing now, especially with our youngers, that we all have a responsibility for, is the harm from the scene itself.
Yeah,
the arrival of the drug dealing clans, the county lines, the shotters, and the absolute levels of unnecessary violence and turf wars that goes with that. So my days now, when a mum or a dad phones me up and says their 14-year-old son is involved in drugs, my first initial thought is, what are they taking? My second initial thought is, are they at risk of being stabbed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's much more dangerous if you're in
such
any environment like that.
Crazy society that we live in where it is at that point. So would it be fair to say that you believe there's a direct correlation between knife crime statistics and drugs? Would you say they sort of go hand in hand in terms of things like county lines and...
Oh, definitely so. And we know this from our own culture as well. We know this from seeing this generations sort of come up through the county line sequence of being recruited, not going to college, not going to school, given a supply of drugs, and then building up their own kind of network of their pyramid sales in their area. And then it's, if you're not achieving in one area, you can either be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond. Yeah. And if you're getting that glamour, you're getting that, I'm the man, and
that
you're getting
bravado.
That kudos, then who wants to give that up? That's one of the things that I knew from being a drug dealer, is you lived this life that was like a movie star, because nobody told you the truth. Nobody said you're an idiot.
Power goes to your head, doesn't it?
Yeah. Everybody's nice to you because you've got something they want.
Yeah.
It is very... There's... Socially, like you say, like you live in this whole movie star, that you live in this whole... How do you think your peer group affected that in a time where you were out, you were dealing? Were your peers out doing similar things, or were they more reserved? Like, what was that sort of situation?
This is where we got the break in the peer groups. As soon as I started moving into the heavier end of things, that good friends that I had, where we just used to get there on a Friday night and have a few spliffs and play backgammon and talk about the world and debating groups and all sorts of things, it moved on from there, and they moved away. I became a different person. And the people I mixed with were different. It became a lot more intense, a lot more violent, and the friendly aspect of the scene wasn't there anymore.
Right, it completely destroyed. Yeah. That was one of the questions. Did your relationship suffer from the lifestyle that you had, like family? Did you fall out with family?
Yes, totally fell out with family, and still am to this day. I still have very little contact with my family at all.
Oh, that's really sad.
You can kind of say it's sad, but we choose our own paths in life, and I'm quite happy with the path I've got now. But I did notice that effect it had, obviously. and the effect it had on close friends that I had that could see the way I was going and see what was going wrong, and I just took no notice. I slipped into it because I wasn't just using on my own. It wasn't like I broke away from my good peer group and fell into a bad peer group. It was kind of like a whole group of us fell out of that good peer group.
Right. You sort of fell out from yourselves, could you say?
Yeah, just we split between one group that kind of said we've got an angle on this and we keep ourselves together and we keep it in its little box and we have our lives, and the other half of us that just went, nah, we'll just get stoned every day and do nothing.
Okay, so I've got a personal question. I do actually have a friend who really struggles with her drinking. She's dabbled in drugs before, and there's been concerns with that as well, but she doesn't do any of that anymore, and she's not an alcoholic. She doesn't drink every day. She doesn't feel the need to have a drink, but when she does drink, she is an absolute liability. She is really dangerous to herself. She puts herself in harm's way. She ends up running away from the group of people that we're in, and we're not knowing where she is. She leaves her phone and everything with us, and then she goes and gets with random boys and goes home with them. It's dangerous, it's not safe, and I'm really concerned about her and her drinking problems and her habits, and I sort of want to be able to help her in some way, but when I'm out with her, she's so stubborn. She doesn't allow anyone to help her. It's only when she sort of sobers up when she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, but the same thing happens again when she gets drunk. So what can I do to offer to help her? Is it sort of, I know it's not rehab because she hasn't got a drinking problem as the fact that she drinks every day. She doesn't drink all the time either, mainly weekends, or if she's having a bit of a shit day, she might drink.
Could you say it's an excess problem? Is it more of a not how much she drinks, it's how much she has in one sitting? Could you say it's more of a...
Not even that, she only has to have one glass of wine and she goes... It just messes with her head.
Right, what you can see here is... Take away the drink, take away, the effects that the drink is having on her. What we can see is what's called a destructive pattern.
Yes,
okay?
Definitely.
When she goes out, she consumes alcohol, her behaviour changes, it becomes more erratic, she puts herself in dangerous situations.
Yeah.
That we call the destructive pattern. Sometimes people have a destructive pattern that causes them to use. I say something to you you find offensive, you shout back at me, you then feel guilty about that maybe you went a bit far, you go and have a drink to calm down.
Yeah.
And that's a destructive pattern if that happens. So what you can show her is she does have a destructive pattern around this. Each time she does this, it presents with a certain type of behaviour. And then what we do is we treat it literally like a railway line with stations, and we look at where we can divert before that happens.
Right.
So she knows, right, if I go out, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to end up doing this, which is going to lead to this, which is going to be this. So as a peer group, where can you put the brakes on?
Okay.
Yeah? Can you tell her to not bring cash with her and you will buy her drinks, so you limit what she can get, not take a credit card with her, organise pick-up points to be taken home at a time, and also get her to understand that it's in her best interest to listen to you as friends.
Yeah. I think she does know that. I think it is just when she drinks, all of that completely goes out the window.
Yeah.
We will have serious talks before we go out, to the point where I'll say, I'm not going to go out with you anymore if you don't start actually looking after yourself when you're out. And she's like, yeah, no, I completely understand, I know. And then as soon as she has that drink, all of that's gone out the window. Everything we've talked about is completely gone. She'll end up launching herself up the floor, really hurting herself, doing crazy things, doing it again.
Yeah.
It's like she wants to hurt herself. She wants to feel pain. And I understand that she does have mental health problems. There are concerns at home. There are so many underlying things. But I sort of, I want a strategy to be able, so I can put in place for her, so that when she does drink, or maybe to sort of show her that she doesn't need to drink, or, I mean, I sort of think that she needs to go on a drinking ban, but I can't force her to do that. It needs to sort of be self-registered, and she understands that, and she self-registers when she's not drinking, and then as soon as she drinks...
Yeah, she takes all this on board in the sober stage, but then when the drink comes around, that all goes out the window, and all that judgment goes.
Yeah, we all think it'll be fine.
You just need to concentrate time and time again, showing her that when you drink, you lose judgment. You've either got to let us make the decisions for you, or you stop.
Yeah.
and gain
It is
some
as simple
control
as that,
over
isn't it,
this.
really?
And to see it, if there is other complications in line, i.e. say a history of mental health or whatever, then it's something to bring the attention of a key worker and make sure she flags it up with the key worker, and then they can work on these structures and work on dealing with the destructive pattern.
Okay, thank you.
We look at situational, and we can look at all these things. What would your advice be to someone who, because I mean, I know people, like I've had friends who have admitted to me they're having a problem, but they can't seek professional help. What do you do in a situation where someone confides in you, but they're too scared to seek professional help? How would you advise someone to approach that?
You can yourself contact an agency on their behalf, ask them advice from a key worker so as they can work through you as a sort of a voice of that, and then encourage that. I know it's really, really difficult for people to walk through the door. Our project in Essex is called Yellow Door, and simply because the biggest thing you ever do is walk through that yellow door. And we know how difficult it is and what it means and what kind of history somebody's had before they walk through that door. All our work is encouraging people to get through that door. That is the crucial part. And the one that is the most help with that is family and their peer group to help and support. I've spoken to this agency. They're really, really good. They've told me this. And in a lot of instances, if the person isn't able to actually come into the agency, then maybe a worker could come out and meet them and somebody that's more comfortable surroundings.
I know there are some cases where you can't do that for them. You can't ring up and make those sort of first steps for someone to get help. But is that not the case for alcohol and drug abuse and things like that? You can actually seek help for someone else.
No, the person would have to come forward to make an appointment to be dealt with. But if you're phoned up with concern about somebody, of course we will give that advice so you can work as a channel to pass that information on.
Because it's one of them where I feel like it happens a lot where, you know, like someone will message one of their friends, but I think I have a bit of a problem, like I don't know who to turn to. And in that situation, if they're turning to you, it is a big responsibility. So I just feel like it needs to be voiced the best way on how to handle that. So your advice would be to ring on behalf and then
speak to one of the agencies, speak to one of the national helplines, phone Frank, whatever, get some advice on how to go forward. But I would suggest in the first option to phone your local agencies, because that's where the person is probably going to end up if they actually do go and seek some help. So it's good that you've got that first point of contact. We use a national helpline, then there's no connection made.
No.
So when they first talk to you, what would your advice be first of all? Because you can contact the agencies and such, but when they go, I have a problem, what would you say the first thing to say is?
My first question is, why do you perceive it's a problem? Because I want the person to understand why they feel it's a problem. It's not good me diagnosing you have a problem.
If you go, this is why.
I want you to point out to me why you felt you needed to come and see me.
Right, yeah.
So we get that bit understood. And then the next bit is how do we approach it? How fast do we approach it? Because I work on a holistic program. Holistic means that in the old days, your GP would come out with lovely lines like, your health is the most important thing. Well, a lot of us go, no, paying the mortgages. I need to go to work. So what we look at now is that if you imagine your life as like the happy pie that I use, where you've got tranquil, rhythmic, all these different forms of happiness that you can achieve, and your chemical part of it, generally in society, is pretty much under control. I have a glass of wine, I have a pint, I go out, I socialise, and it's kept pretty controlled. When somebody starts to present with a problem, you see it eating up these other elements of the pie. Now, for me, the things that I'm looking at on there is the effect on your relationship, the effect on your family, your finances, your work, your education. And in the old days, what we would do is we find the person where everything is eaten up and all there is the drug use. So we get them off the drug really, really quickly, and then they relapse because we've taken everything out and not put anything back.
There's nothing there.
So now what I need to do is to start to stabilise. Yeah. So I don't go straight out for getting you off of the drug. I try and stabilise it, and then we concentrate on these other things. And if I put more and more chunks back in that pie, less and less need for the drug.
Yeah, it's a really good way of doing it. Really good way of doing it.
It is
definitely evolved.
Yeah,
It has
it's
so
evolved a long
much, so
time.
much. Yes.
Because like I know people my age who have a drug dependency, and they've acknowledged it's a problem, but they don't want to fix it. They're scared of what that would mean. How would you approach someone like that, where they've said they have a problem but they don't want to try and fix it? How would you try and approach a situation like that?
It's like anything. The first step is always the biggest one. It always seems like unsurmountable. If somebody's heavily involved in drugs and the drug scene, for instance, and it's taken over all their life, me asking them to stop is like asking you to emigrate.
Yeah.
It's just not going to
You've
happen.
got to change everything in your life. And that's a pretty unrealistic expectation for a lot of people. So let's do it in bite-sized chunks. Yeah?
So
Let's break it down a little bit, do it at a little bit of a slower rate. And when people go, oh, I can't face that first step, I go, what first step? You've already done the first step. You're here with me.
So
You've already started.
for someone who would talk to a peer and say they have an issue, but they say that they don't want professional help, would you say that the peer could help them get to a point where they want to seek professional help? So like they're like, oh no, I'm scared about going in. Could the peer help them want to make them go in, sort of thing?
Of course, it might not necessarily be making them come into a service and receive treatment,
No,
but
not
a
like
friend
that.
may well just be able to help them enough that they realise their own usage and they can cut down on that without the help of an agency. Never underestimate the value of friendship. It's the most powerful tool that we have, and it's the most key element in people's recovery is
Having
the
a good
support of
support
their
network.
friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you say that when you're working, you talk to the friends of the person you're working with? You try and so if they say you're working with someone and they bring their friends with them for support, would you say you try and talk to them and help involve them in rebuilding the pie and stuff like this?
If I have the client's permission, remember it's confidential. If I ask them, can I speak to your friends? Can I help your friends supporting this? And once we've worked out that they're good friends and they support it and everything, then fine. If the person gives me that permission, and of course they're a major part of the care plan, it really, really helps.
If they ask you, so what would you say to the friends of someone who's asked for their help? How would you address that?
Well, what they can really do is find out what the product is they believe they've got a problem with. They can get some information on that product and pass it on. They can get them to speak to a line if they're willing to just anonymously phone a call line and get some information and speak to a key worker. But what you're doing that way is you're encouraging that gateway, that access to services. You're showing them that there is a path. Whether they want to walk that path is their choice.
Their choice, yeah.
But you're showing them that path.
Cool. I have actually just found Finley's question. It's right at the bottom. How come some people get addicted, whereas other people don't? Do you believe that addiction can be viewed as a spectrum? Is it? Obviously, we know it's completely situational and environmental. Some people have parents who are addicted to drugs and might go down the same path.
That's a very interesting point, and we had a bit of a debate on that last week with an organisation that deals with gambling, for instance. And this thing constantly comes up of this addictive gene. I don't believe in the theory of addictive gene.
Right.
Why I say that is what we hear time and time again about the addictive gene is they've interviewed people that had a drug problem that admitted that their parents had a drug problem.
Right.
What they didn't do was balance that with interviewing people that don't have a drug problem because their parents had a drug problem.
Yeah, I mean, my mum is an alcoholic and I hate alcohol. I have a really high tolerance to alcohol. I hate the taste of it. I hate the effects. And I very, very, in rare occasions do I drink because I don't like the effects.
Right.
And I sort of believe, for me, it's affected me in completely the opposite way.
Exactly.
I am scared of alcohol in most circumstances because I've seen my mum absolutely just go mental and absolutely lose herself on many occasions, and I'm terrified of that happening. But for other people, it's completely different. They will see their parents go down that line. They think that's the only sort of path, that's the only way. They've been brought up in this. They know it. It's like almost easy for them to go down that route.
This is one of the dangers. If you subscribe to the theory of addictive gene and addictive personality. The problem is then it gives somebody a way of they don't have to take personal responsibility. Oh, it's in my genes.
Yeah.
Well, I really don't believe that. I really believe that we're all individuals and we can make our own decisions and we can change our path.
Yeah.
We don't have to do something because it was predestined from our parents. We can change our route. And I believe it's a very dangerous road to go down when we start talking about addictive gene, because it really does take away personal responsibility.
And it makes them feel like they can't get out of it even if they tried, because it's in their body, it's in their genes.
Exactly.
It's like they don't even try after they've got that mentality.
Exactly. Yeah. So 100%. I'd steer away from that as much as possible.
Okay,
right. So I guess the last question, because we're running out of time here, unfortunately. I guess my last question would be: Is where you are now where you want to stay forever? Can you see yourself educating and trying to help people for as long as you can?
As long as I can will be a great one. I'm getting towards the end.
But
yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you're saying that I still come over credible and the information is still listened to. But I am aware, that I'm 55 now. There's a point when young people look round and go, what do you know?
Yeah.
And there's also a point when, with my team that I'm working with now, we're empowering them, giving them that knowledge. So as they go
sort
out,
of
same as
passing
I
the
do
baton
here,
almost.
literally passing the baton on. It's the next generation's job.
Yeah.
And it's always our job, whether you're elder or younger, to pass that information on.
To get it across. Yeah, right. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much for coming in.
You've been
brilliant. Really informative.
Absolute pleasure.
So much.
Thank you so much for the
thank all you guys as well for listening to Miskin, Elliot Offer, Maliha. Done.